He says, Shahida indi rijalun mardiyun. That some reliable men inform me. Mardiyun means maqbulu ash-shahada. Maqbulu ash-shahada. Men whose shahada is accepted. Meaning whose testimonies are accepted. وَلَمْ يَذْكُرْ مِنْهُمْ سِوَى عُمَرٍ. And he didn't mention anyone from amongst those men who are mardiyun, or those men who are maqbulun lishahadatihim, those who are, their testimony is accepted and they're trustworthy and they're reliable. He didn't mention anyone except Umar, meaning their other ones were also accepted, but he didn't mention the names, but that they could have been mentioned. He says, and the statement, أَرْضَاهُمْ, the most reliable, means أَبْلَغُهُمْ قُبُولًا عِنْدِي. أَبْلَغُهُمْ قُبُولًا عِنْدِي means those who their acceptability with me, meaning in my opinion, in the opinion of Abdullah ibn Abbas, in my opinion, these are the most acceptable. They have the utmost of acceptance with me. And then he says, Umar, huwa ibn al-Khattab. Here, Umar means the son of al-Khattab, radiyallahu anhu, وسبقت ترجمته في الحديث رقم الأول. And his biography has already preceded us in hadith number 51 hadiths ago. As far as naha, that means naha means he forbade, or the Prophet forbade. I mean, he says talab al-kaf, meaning he requested to refrain. Naha, or forbade, means to request to refrain from something. And as-salah, from the salah, means salatul nafal. Salah and nafal, meaning from the optional prayers. The optional prayers. Refraining from performing the optional prayers. And this is important because the word that Abdullah ibn Abbas used in this hadith, when he said as-salah, the word salah here means salatul nafal, the optional prayers, because we know we have 3 types of prayers. There are no other prayers other than 3. There's no 4th type of prayer. Doesn't exist in Islam. There are the maktubat. Those are the prayers that are the obligatory prayers. Mafruḍa, they also call them, the obligatory prayers. And then the second category right beneath them are the sunan prayers, which are the supererogatory. We call them in English supererogatory. The first type are obligatory. The second type are sunan, which are the supererogatory prayers. And the third and final type are the nawafil, which we call them optional. That's what's meant in this particular hadith, the optional prayers. And before we go further, inshallah, we want to mention again the times of prayers, so that when we know the times of prayers, then we'll know when we discuss these 2 hadiths about the prohibited times, awqatun nahi, then the picture, inshallah, should become clear. We want to ask the question. Instead of mentioning, we want to ask the question. By raising the hand, who can tell us when Fajr ends? When does Fajr prayer end? At the time of sunrise, when the sun rises. Who can tell us by the raising of the hand when Dhuhr begins? When you see the shadow cast forward? Anybody agree or disagree? When it's equal to the length of an object? Huh? When the sun reaches the uppermost zenith? Anyone else? Who agrees with any of these 3 brothers? Who disagrees? Nobody disagrees either? Nobody agrees and nobody disagrees. You agree or disagree? How about the other one? The question once again is, when does Dhuhr begin? That's pretty good, man. At noon. When does it begin? Everybody's dealing with shadows.
It begins when the sun is at the highest point in the sky.
That's what he meant. That's what he meant. And that's what you said. Is he correct? Huh? That's not correct either? When does Dhuhr begin? When the time on that wall, on that piece of paper on the wall says it, right? When does the time of Dhuhr begin? When the sun declines from the highest point in the sky. That's when Dhuhr begins. That's when Dhuhr begins. Has nothing to do with the shadow. The shadow is after the fact. The beginning of the time of Dhuhr is when that sun starts to decline from the highest point in the sky. That's when Dhuhr begins. When does Dhuhr end? When does Dhuhr, Salatul Dhuhr end? Huh? No, what did you say? When the shadow? He went back to the shadow. I was going to say something, but only the brothers my age and Abdul Raqib are going to know. I was going to say, the shadow knows. You young guys, you don't know about that. And the young guys would say, man, what the world is he talking about? The shadow knows. The Dhuhr ends when Asr begins. That's it. When Asr begins, that's when Dhuhr ends. Now, when does Asr begin? Huh? When does Asr begin? Should we go back to those hadiths about the times of Dhuhr and Asr and Maghrib and Isha and Fajr? Oh. That won't work. When does Asr end? When does Asr begin? At the end of Dhuhr. When does Asr end? Anybody? When does Asr end? Huh? When Maghrib begins. The end of Asr is the beginning of Maghrib. When does Maghrib end? Huh? The beginning of Isha? We start to see stars in the sky? When it gets dark? I like that one. When it gets dark. Anybody else? When does Maghrib end? When the Isha comes in. He took the safe road. When the red glow disappears. Maghrib ends when the red glow totally disappears. When does Isha end? Huh? At Fajr, you agree? Huh? 11:30? No. We're not saying that some people are wrong. We're saying that he was wrong, yes, but he could be right. Muhammad Amin's son could be right. He said midnight. You agree? Yeah, Isha ends at midnight, not Fajr. Not Fajr. Now, when is midnight? Depends on the season. How do you calculate it? How do you calculate midnight according to the Sharia? I mean, how? To explain. Midnight. So that you'll know when Isha ends. How? Explain. Give us an example. What are you going to use to determine midnight? What times What time?